very good morning, a very good afternoon, a very good evening from whichever part of the globe that you may be listening at whatever time it may be on your side. Thank you so much for listening to Bin Bag Banter or Hum Hai Bansi Bhat, bringing you episode number 7 being Mind the Gap. Wow. I had not used that line in ages when I was on radio. That is how I always used to introduce myself as Hum Hai Bansi Bhat. Oh boy, those were the days, I must say. Well then, with that, before we move forward, I would once again like to say a big thank you to all of you who listen to my episodes, who have subscribed to my channel, my YouTube channel, to be able to keep up with all the latest affairs on Being Bad Banter, and not forgetting thank you to all those of you who do get in touch with me via email, messages, calls, appreciating what we do at Being Bad Banter. Asante sana, guys. Well, our topic today is actually a challenge that every household is facing, where understanding, communication, experiences and so on is getting very difficult by the day due to the generation gap. That's right, we are talking about the generation gap today. In simple terms, I would say that the earlier generation had limited exposure to the outside world due to the lack of gadgets and internet. Also, they would rely best on their elders and siblings for advice and opinions, whereas the present generation has all the reasons to be able to form opinions, share advice, follow their thoughts, and communicate with confidence. Correct me if I'm wrong to say that this is a challenge that is not only common in households but also at workplaces. Well, a generation gap is commonly known phenomenon where youngsters feel misunderstood by their parents and elders because of the difference in age group. The gap tends to get wider as the ages between parents and their children are often large enough that they experienced their most sensitive years during a different culture than each other. Adolescence is often the time when people are most influenced by society and the society around them. And as our world keeps developing and changing, things rarely stay the same, causing generation gaps between parents and their children. Well, come to think of it, there are so many realistic reasons as to why a generation gap exists between parents and children, or between employer and employee, and so on. And of course, since we are now in this progressive world, where time is ever moving forward and not forgetting change is unavoidable, the values, tastes, likes, dislikes, outlook of life in general is changing with each generation. And of course, due to this, there is lack of communication and understanding between the two generations, since their view of the world was colored by how society functioned. Well, one factor that has heavily influenced generation gaps is the accelerating rate of change in society. Well, in the 1800s, developments in society were slow. As a result, 2 or 3 generations lived lifestyles that were very similar to each other. There weren't many differences across generations. However, given technological and social advances that have taken place in the 20th and 21st centuries, the lifestyles of individuals, even one generation apart, are drastically different from each other. I mean, just think about all of the changes in technology that have occurred in the past 20 years. Many individuals from older generations are having trouble keeping up with the modern technologies that millennials have become accustomed to. Due to generation gaps, a child may explain to an adult how to use technology, or a young adult will choose to spend his time on public transportation texting, while an older man passes the time reading. And I'm sure we all have come across such scenarios at least once in our lifetime, if not more. Also, in the earlier days, society was not very mobile. Most people used to stay in the same area or nearby, and therefore there were very minimal communication with the people who are not staying in the same area. Therefore, access to information from other cultures was very limited. You just had to stick by what you could see around you and what you could experience just around you. In short, you are only familiar with what you see and what you hear. And so awareness was also limited in terms of information and knowledge. There are, of course, many reasons as to why we have this thing called generation gap between children and parents. One of them being lack of understanding. Different generations sometimes seem to speak a different language due to the changes in society from where parents were growing up to how it is in the time of their children. Even their way of thinking and what they feel and agree to be normal tends to be different. Parents are unable to understand why there is so much of stubbornness when it comes to agreement. However, the children are right in their thinking and so are the parents. Secondly, I would say that when children make mistakes, parents are not able to tolerate these mistakes and they end up shouting at the children, and so these children get very demotivated. This widens the gap between parents and their children. In order for children to grow in life and move forward, they should be allowed to make mistakes. I mean, you learn from your mistakes, right? And also, I do not understand this idea of parents having dreams for their children. When you grow up, you have to become a doctor or you have to become a lawyer, because I was not able to do so. I mean, it is very important to let your children decide on what makes them happy. We cannot punish them and ruin their future only because we as parents were unable to do what we wanted to do. This is another very important factor that leads to lack of proper communication. And due to the responsibilities of being an adult and the stress that comes from work life, parents often find themselves too tired to spend enough time with their children every day. This causes a lack of communication and interaction that widens the generation gap. And as parents, you must allocate certain number of hours in a day to your children. It is important to know how your child's day has been, what challenges may he or she have come across during the day, and so on. In short, I would say that communication is key. Well, on the other hand, there are many ways to bridge this generation gap and generally make our surrounding a better place to live in. Firstly, we need to keep an open mind and try and understand where your children are coming from. Parents often feel like because they have already been the age their child is currently, that they understand how their child thinks. But the truth is, the world and the way of life was different then than it is now. And their mindset will be very different, and it can also be shocking for some parents. This is why keeping an open mind and not assuming that they must be just like you are at their age is very important. Well, times have changed and so our thinking needs to change too, to be able to fit into your child's thought process. And again, I would repeat and say that communication is key. It is as simple as talking about each other's day at the end of the day can help you, just get to know each other and make it easier to speak freely around each other. Communication makes you understand each other's thought processes, and it also makes the child comfortable and to be able to come to you and talk to you about anything and not hide any sort of issues or matters from you. And another very important act is that of being a good listener to your children. As a parent, you may want to also listen to your child's views and opinions on certain subjects and topics instead of always giving them talks and lectures. This will in return give the child confidence in decision making as well as give him or her motivation in airing his or her opinions in front of you. And of course, with listening comes understanding, and this means that you have to learn to put yourself in your child's shoes and trying to understand how they feel and what they want from what they tell you. If you are able to understand where your child is coming from, you will be able to close the generation gap to some extent. In short, be a support and a backbone for your child. Remember that it is important to understand that children have their own thoughts and opinions, and being patient and loving will help to close the generation gap that causes distance between parent and child. And this is regardless of the age. As a parent, to be able to have a healthy relationship with your children, you have to be encouraging and motivating and as well as supportive in their decisions, be it personal or professional, rather than just going on and on about what you have done in life or what you have achieved in life. For a child, the strongest support will always be that of their parents. No friends or relatives can replace that bond. And I'm pretty sure that you all will agree with me on this. And with that, I had a few of you who did get in touch with me via email, sharing your experiences with your children and how you feel you are unable to relate to their thinking. Nazneen, thank you very much for listening to Beanbag Banter. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on board. Nazneen, you tell us that you feel peer pressure plays a big part in this, simply because not all parents are able to reason out their decisions and thought processes to their children, and therefore many end up giving up very quickly. Parents these days do not have patience and time to be able to listen to what their children think, and therefore they are very quick in accepting and giving in. You say that many of us also think that since we are not able to enjoy a luxury life in our young days, we want our children to have the best, not realizing that times were different then, situations were different then. Thank you, Nazneen. Thank you so much for your beautiful thoughts. I also had another very interesting email that came in from Mr. X. You requested me not to reveal your identity, and we shall respect that on Beanbag Banter. You went ahead to tell me that by the grace of God, you have everything in life. Your dad started a business in the late 80s, and today you have managed to take over well from him. However, you have always had arguments with him in regards to how he used to run the business and how you do it in the present times. Your dad is not willing to accept the advancement in technology. He still prefers manual workings. I try really hard to make work easy for us, but end up doing things twice since he is more comfortable with a book and a pen. And so many a times you do feel that these situations come up only because neither of us are willing to be considerate. Both of us are right in our own ways, but our thought processes are very different. Well, Mr. X, I think I can somehow relate to this situation, and yes, you are right to say that neither of you are wrong. Perhaps he feels more in control when he works manually, and on the other hand, you are only trying to make work easier and quicker by using technology. Well, cell phones, smartphones, computers. Today's generation lives and breathes technology. Your child's toys are likely to even be electronic in nature, such as computer games to teach letters and numbers, whereas the older generation who grew up in a time when handwritten letters meant something and texting was a foreign word. Grandparents are usually going to be upset if your children are texting at the dinner table or checking their smartphones, emails during a movie or family reunion, and they are probably not willing to accept the difference. Well then, Mr. X, thank you very much for your wonderful contribution on our topic today. Well, on that note, all what I have got to say is listen to each family member's perspective to start bridging the generation gap and allow opinions to be expressed without judgment. Assist older family members in learning the new lingo and technology so they do not feel lost, which might contribute to misunderstandings and arguments. And I repeat, communication is key here to be able to have and develop healthy relationships between generations. And on that note, we come to the end of our topic today, being mind the gap. I would love to hear from you and know from you on how you manage the gap here, be it with your children or with your grandparents or with your parents. What are some of the challenges that you come across? We at Beanbag Banter would be pleased to receive your contributions. Please feel free to get in touch with us via email, which is beanbagbanter@gmail.com. You can find us on Insta. My ID is beanbagbanter, and you can also find me on Facebook. My ID is Bansi Bhatt. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, then please do so to be able to keep up with all my latest episodes of Beanbag Banter with Bansi Bhatt. And this is where we tend to touch topics that are related to our personal lives, our daily routines, professional challenges, and so on. If you have any topic that you would like us at Beanbag Banter to feature on our podcast, please do get in touch with me on my email. Once again, it's beanbagbanter@gmail.com, and we will be pleased to take it up. And before I say goodbye, as we all know that International Women's Day is just around the corner, and on our next episode, we shall be talking about how good we women are. And once again, thank you so very much for listening to Beanbag Banter with Bansi Bhatt. It is always a pleasure to receive your lovely feedback on my topics, be it positive or negative. It only makes me better. Love you all.